Item 5.
Received quarterly report from Police Department.
I want to talk about staffing. We've experienced some gains, actually, in filling our vacancies. When we look at it, we've been pretty successful in our recruiting. I think the recruiter that you hired for HR has been significantly. We have 26% more people in the pipeline just coming in and taking our test than we had last year, the last 2 years. So we're already seeing some of the results of that. If you look here, the public safety professionals, we're just one away from filling that one. The records clerk, there's one vacancy. Dispatchers, we're down to 2, and we have 7 officers. We have 13 officers in the academy right now with 2 academy classes. We're looking for our 3rd class. We've already hired 3 people for the July class. We're looking to start July 11th. And I'm prayerful that we're going to get all 7 of those in that class, and we'll be at 234 after this academy starts.
Great news. Great news.
I want to talk real quick about DWI arrests. This is not one that you'll see on your normal crime report, but it's something that's very, very important that our folks do very, very well. We were notified by the Sam Houston State Criminal Justice Agency there, who tracks DWI arrests across the state. They do training for most of the folks in the state, that we're number 1 in the region in DWI arrests, and we're number 4 in all of North Texas, going all the way to Amarillo, that far north. Part of the reason is because one of our officers takes DWIs very, very seriously, and he helped develop a system that simplifies the arrest reporting process. Everybody hates to deal with DWIs because they're going to get sick on you at some point, and they're going to make a mess for you. But it's just difficult to do the warrant, to go through all the standardized field sobriety testing. But he's made that process simple, and you can see there from the second quarter of 2017 all the way through. We're working very, very hard. In first quarter of 2018, we're already seeing some of the positive results of those changes that he made. And so these are our top DWI arrest officers here: Marsack, Walton, Odom, Christopherson, Solis, and they're all on the late night shift, which would make sense. People leaving clubs at 2 in the morning. These folks work 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And we have 26 miles of highway in the city, so it's not necessarily that everybody here drinks more. A lot of people we arrest for DWI don't live here in Mesquite. They're just passing through, and we end up dealing with them because of accidents or because our guys are proactive and they catch them. We'll talk about crime burglaries here. We break the burglaries down by residential and by commercial businesses. We're seeing here the first quarter of 2018, a decrease compared to the last few years from 15, 16, and 17. Significant decrease in February, and we made a couple of big arrests right at the end of January, and we think impacted those numbers for February. Burglary of businesses or commercial burglary, they're pretty much flat when you add all those numbers out. They're not as high as residential, but they're also flatline. We hadn't had as much success there. Vehicle theft is still about flat from the last few years. It went down in 2016, but it's back up now. We're seeing part of that, and I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. We do the analysis. We talked about the crime analysis, the crime analyst that you hired. Every time we have a crime, they break down the day of week, time of day, and look at the method of operation, the modus operandi. And one of the things we found was that they were stealing a lot of vehicles on the freeway, vehicles that were broken down or disabled there. Before they could get somebody to come back to them, a wrecker would hook up to them and tow them. So they deployed one of our bait vehicles out there, and lo and behold, somebody came and stole it. They tracked the bait vehicle over to Riley Road, address off Riley Road in Dallas, and you'll see to the right of that screen there was 300 cages with roosters in them. We believe it was an animal fighting operation there, and so the same kind of people who steal the cars and do this are involved in other kinds of criminal activity. So we contacted the SPCA of Texas, and they took up the investigation of that. But we're finding all kinds of different things there. At this place, we found 6 stolen vehicles besides the one that we with our tracker. So we're using the technology to enhance our ability to respond, and we're doing the analytics, and we're a data-driven organization, and this is some of the results of that. Burglary of a vehicle. Burglary of vehicles. One of those things it's our most often reported crime in the city of Mesquite. We hope that the whole take, lock, and hide PSAs and program about it. We've seen some improvement. We'll talk more specifically about those results later on in the process. Well, actually, the next slide. There we go. So the unlocked vehicles, we were seeing as many as 60% of the vehicles unlocked. So we started the Take Lock and Hide program, developed a little flyer that they could put on the windshield wipers, windshields of cars. And if you look at the left there of the screen, commercial burglaries, we've seen the biggest decrease there of the ones that are being forced and not unlocked. But the residential area is still pretty flat, and so are the apartment complex. So we're going to work harder about targeting the apartment complexes and passing out the Take Lock and Hide and the educational materials. If you look at 2017, the last quarter there, 45% were unlocked. That was at the peak. We rolled that out in November at the peak of the holiday season, so we did see a dip in the number of BMVs where the vehicle was unlocked there. So we think that program was successful, and we'll continue to build on that going forward. This is typical of one of the vehicle burglars that we catch. Looking at the analytics, they believe that this suspect was on foot, and you see on the north there on the top of the screen, that's where he lived, and he worked down at the bottom, and he walked to work. And so they identified a suspect, they got him in custody, he confessed to some, others were able to put on him because of fingerprints. And if you look from November 21st to December 24th, that's how many offenses were hit in that area that we believe were attributed to this one guy. And then from December 24th to January 11th, there was not a single reported burglary of motor vehicle there. So targeting the right people at the right place at the right time is paying dividends for us. Aggravated assault, you see there's an increase from February to March. We're going to look at that on the next slide. The family members, most of these folks know each other. When you look at the overall numbers, 17 are family members. They're not family, but they're known on 11 of those, an internet transaction. So to say that they know each other, they're meeting to sell something or purchase something, and they end up in an altercation, and somebody assaults the other. But there's still a number of those, 29 of those, that are either a road rage where they're not known or an unknown suspect. We look at the number of these cases, just over half of them involve a firearm. To qualify for aggravated assault, there must be serious bodily injury, and that's defined as causing substantial injury necessitating medical treatment, like stitches or even a surgery or something like that, or hospitalization, or use a deadly weapon. So the most common deadly weapon used is a firearm, and the next is a knife or cutting instrument. Robbery. We've had a few high-profile robberies, and I would like to talk to you about some of those specifics of those and the analytics that we go into catching those folks. If you look at the fourth quarter of 2017 to the first quarter of 2018, there was just a slight uptick there in the numbers. 6 from March to December, and then from January to October, there was a little bump up there. And when we do the analysis, robbery by type, the weapon used, firearm, you can see starting back in 2016 a steady increase in the use of firearms in robberies. I believe that correlates to the same kind, the prosecution of the cases in county court, but they're treating them more as property crimes and not crimes of violence. And so our strategy going forward, and part of getting the NIBIN system, is to get as many of these cases in federal court as possible. The federal court has minimum mandatory sentencing guidelines, and there's less discretion for the judge. If they're caught and they're convicted, then they have to get minimum times years upon years, and I'm going to show you one of those examples. Before I do that, I would like to talk to you here about the beats. This is the beats for the city. If you look at the very top there, that's beat 1, everything north of I-30, and come down to that, that's the next one is 2 beat, 3 beat, and then 4 beat. That's the whole green, and then it drops down. We divide the city into quadrants, into 4 sections there. That's why they're quadrants, and we assign a lieutenant to each one. And we're going to talk about the crime in the quadrants there, what they do. Lieutenant Borden, this is 1 beat and 2 beat. The yellow there is 1 beat, and the one slightly different color there with the fingers pointing, that's 2 beat, beat 1 and beat 2. So everything north of I-30, then everything, the piece of the pie there between 30 and 80 is his area. He received a city council complaint about a lady of the night working a car wash over there. He was able to identify her and arrest her. And on the right there, you see some of her arrests. She has quite a colorful criminal history, and she hasn't been seen since she's been arrested there and been dealt with. This is also Preston Hoke. He works at that area regularly on the late night shift. We had a robbery on the 31st. out there, and the suspect rode away on one of those green bicycles. He found the guy, a homeless guy, who was driving one of those line bikes, the green bike. He got him identified and arrested him. He was charged with the robbery, and he's been arrested 6 times. And that's his information on the lower left of your screen there. Robbery, and then theft of property, possession of marijuana, neighborhood resident he's a neighborhood resident with a drug habit. So he has a home there, but he's not welcome in the home, so he kind of flops place to place, and sometimes he'll just sleep outside. So that's why he's part of the problem he's in. He has a serious drug habit. Also in the 1B up there, Casa Ridge, the town crossing. We talked about this motel here, the cross lines that was mentioned earlier. We're going to recommend it for T25. It's not there yet, but we're in discussions about getting it there. Our deployment group, which is a group of officers on overtime that we target high crime areas based on the analysis that we do, has made a number of arrests there for drugs. And you can see on the right there, these are some of the 2 arrests for heroin, 2 for cocaine, 2 for marijuana. It's a veritable buffet drug market there. You can get just about anything you want. So we're going to get those folks into the process and talk with the city attorney's office about dealing with them. This is just an example of one of the things. One of the reasons auto theft is up is this is a headline here from the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is the largest English language newspaper, online English language newspaper in the world. They get 11 million readers a day, so they say. But they sell auto theft kits, not car theft kits, and they even rate them on the ones that are easiest to use or the most effective. And so it's hard to deal with crime when you can go there and just order stuff up and they tell you what works and what doesn't. But that's one of the reasons we see some of the spike in auto thefts. The next section we're going to look at, quadrant is 3 and 4 beat. That's Lieutenant Caldwell. This includes the retail area. All of the retail area, town east area there, the mall and adjacent areas is beat 3, and the areas to the east of that, to the city limits, are beat 4. So you see it outlined there in red. That's his area. The biggest crime going on there is BMVS, burglary of motor vehicles, because of all of the potential targets there. So his biggest strategy that he's been employing is using the signboard that we purchased. The signboard gives a warning sign like bait car in the area or extra police patrols, and we deployed that 60 times at various locations. So we had hotspots, the Home Depot, the Target, Olive Garden. He also uses the 2 Skywatch towers and deploy them around there in conjunction with the mall. And we've seen the success there of reducing the number of BMVs based on those deployments. You look at the numbers here from the last quarter of 2017. Keep it in mind, even in 2017, the last quarter was the holiday season. There was significantly more people and vehicles in the area, more targets of opportunity, and we saw this. Still, we saw a reduction in the first quarter of 2018. Lieutenant Hensley has the mid part of the city there. 5 beat, which is everything west of 635, and then 6 beat east of 635 and north of Eastgate there, East Glen. Yeah, there we go. And so it's those are his areas. These 2 officers work the areas regularly. Officer Zimmerman, he works the deep night shift from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Officer Woodruff works 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. They started sharing information about different locations and people they were coming in contact with each other, and the crime analyst got that information and developed a profile on the people in places. So they developed 7 locations, identified 7 locations where criminals were hanging out at. 25 people were contacted there with lengthy criminal histories. 3 residences were condemned as public nuisances. 1 was later returned back to the owner. 15 people were arrested, and there was a 50% decrease in BMVs from one quarter to the next. And the real good part is that last bullet, there's no real increase in BMVs in the neighboring beat, so they didn't just push crime from that beat somewhere else. They reduced it. And here's a quarter-by-quarter comparison. First quarter of 2017, first quarter of 2018, those numbers went from 423 down to 258 overall, and from fourth quarter 17 to first quarter 2018, 362 to 258. So significant reductions, no matter which way we compared it. One of those addresses was in the Powell area. If you look at the map on the left, there's a high concentration, those green dots. Those are each individual burglary of motor vehicles. They identified an address at 1610 Allen, and they arrested 3 people there. They got the house condemned, and at the last quarter of 2017, there were 80 BMVs in 5 beat, highly concentrated right there. When you look over the first quarter of 2018, it was reduced to 41, and there were only 2 in that same area last year. So they reduced it by 39 offenses. It's a great piece of work by those guys and by the analysts putting all those pieces of the puzzle together with them. The last one is Lieutenant Talley, 7, 8, and 9 beat, all the way down to the Kaufman County side of our city limits. The biggest issue going on in the first quarter was robberies. Trends for robberies in the first quarter, you can see we had 20 robberies compared to 11 in the fourth quarter of 2017. And the one big one that made the news was the Whataburger robberies. They hit us 5 times, but they hit 20 times in 15 different cities. And you can see the dots here. They went as far north as Princeton and as far south as Ennis. They hit Terrell. They hit, Grapevine. They were all over the place. And you notice one of the things here that our analyst picked up on was all the crimes are near freeways, and they were all places that stayed open 24 hours. So we developed some information based on an Ennis to Chase that ended in Waxahachie. We got the vehicle, got it fingerprinted, developed some information on who rented the car. Our detectives worked very, very hard. We were able to identify 2 of the 3 suspects and get them arrested. We worked with the FBI. This is another one of our strategies to get them in federal court. The FBI has a violent crime task force. There's a federal law called the Hobbs Act. If you disrupt interstate commerce, then you qualify to get into federal court, because FBI doesn't normally work robberies like this. They work bank robberies and kidnappings and things like that. But under the Hobbs Act, these businesses changed their method of operation. They started closing during different hours instead of being open 24 hours, closing their lobby. They changed their practice based on this crime pattern. And so these guys that we picked up, the FBI came out, they're going to adopt the case federally, and these guys are going to be looking in state court here in Dallas County in Texas. They would likely get probation, and they're looking at 50 years federal time minimum for this. So they're looking at spending pretty much the rest of their adult lives in federal prison because of this string of robberies. And that's what we have to do if we're going to make an impact, is to get some of these guys, just lock them up. That's just the bottom line. We also had a string of robberies going on in the south end there in Beat 7. This was Main Street Munchies. This was a couple of other businesses down there. We identified a suspect. He was arrested. He was good for 6 of them. There were 7 robberies, and he was good for 6 of them. This included the Subway on Cartwright and also the O'Reilly Auto Parts across the street from that as well. And he actually robbed one of the workers there because the business was already closed, robbed him in the parking lot. One robbery there was not attributed to him, and that's at the Easy Mart there. You can see it, Clay Mathis, and that's because the clerk and the suspect knew each other, and they set up the robbery so they could split the proceeds. And so it wasn't all attributed to the one guy. Also, we had a string of robberies targeting Hispanic folks. We had 7 of them here in our city in February and in March. If you look at this group went all the way to Addison to rob people. They did 2 robberies in Garland. They did 7 in our city. That's what the red dots there are for. The little box shows the apartment complexes they were targeting. The purples are where they dumped stolen vehicles. We know that they dumped them because they had their fingerprints taken out of them. This was a crew of 3 juveniles, 2 15-year-olds, a 16-year-old, and a 17-year-old. The only adult was 17. And so we got video surveillance out of them where those green dots are. One of those, they tried to use a credit card at an ATM of one of the victims of the crime, or a debit card, and we got good video. We did a public release of that video, and we got them identified and got them all arrested. So the crime's not located just here. You can see from the Whataburger robberies, from these robberies, that they're mobile. They go all over the place. Our people go out there and hit. Other people come here and hit. It's a combination of things. Robberies are not something that's just unique to Mesquite by any means. This is one of the last things. This actually happened in February, but it's a great story, and it talks about the diligence of the men and women of our department, and especially in CID. We routinely recover skimmers from gas pumps anywhere from 5, 6, 7 a month. In the month of April, they found 15 on different gas pumps across the city. And so that caused our detectives, our forgery and fraud detectives and the supervisor to go out and do surveillance at individual gas stations. They were doing one of those surveillances a week ago, and they saw a car pull up with 4 people in it, and they started putting skimmers. Watched them put a skimmer in a machine. And before they could pull up there and get them stopped, they had the second set of pumps put another skimmer there. And so this is a group of Cuban nationals out of Houston, and we're working with the Secret Service. So they got them for this. They also found a thumb drive in their possession that they got a search warrant for and downloaded, and they found over 300 credit card information of different people on that. And they also got skimmers off this group out of the Exxon at 1641 and I-20 out in Talty. So this is a great piece of work, and our officers just analyzing where they're recovering them, looking at those types of businesses going out there and following up, doing good old-fashioned police work, sitting in the car and just trying to catch somebody in the act. That's what they did. So with that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll take any questions.
Chief, we appreciate the information. I tell you what, it's an unheralded job that our police and fire do, but especially our police. It's often said in different areas that, what can we do? How can we stop people from coming to Mesquite and committing crimes? I think you get this information out that says, you come to Mesquite, we're going to catch you. I think that'll go a long way to get people to stop coming into Mesquite and doing that kind of stuff. But very good information, and we appreciate all the work that you do in your department. I tell you what, the data-driven stuff, 5 years ago we weren't there, but today we see where the monies that we've tried to allocate as a council to our police department are paying dividends. I think that's great.
Absolutely, sir. I'm very appreciative of the support the council has given us in the 5-year plan to hire those 2 crime analysts and to upgrade the technology so we can do these analytics. It's a tremendous boost to our investigative capabilities.
Great, and looking forward to getting full staff here pretty soon, we hope, as well.
Yes, sir. You too.
Questions, comments? Mr. Archer, Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, first of all, appreciate your efforts to bring more of these crimes into federal court so we can actually put some folks away. So thank you and good work on these things. Would you say that are the majority of the robberies, the armed robberies, are those indeed mostly young people from what you can tell, or is that just a mix?
It's been a mix. That one crew was young folks. The others were, the Whataburger guys were all in their 20s. Okay. And so but that one crew targeting the folks in the apartment complex parking lots, they were all 3 juveniles, 1 17, So it is a mix, yes, sir.
And what, in your years of experience, what do you think is driving a lot of that? Is it drug use? Is it just, if you would, whatever your thoughts are?
I think there's several contributing factors to the increase in robberies. Number one, nationwide and in the state of Texas, there's an appetite at the federal and the state level. There's a narrative being driven up out there about the mass incarceration and what a failure that was of the 80s and 90s. And we're dealing with the effects of that now. So, and it depends on your view on corrections itself. Are we to rehabilitate folks, or are we just to incapacitate them so they can't commit further offenses? I believe we have to be able to do both. And some folks, when they go out and put guns in people's faces, they need to be incapacitated because they're going to hurt somebody. It's only a matter of time that somebody's going to resist or something bad's going to happen. So I think the move away from harsher sentencing for aggravated crimes is a contributing factor to that. I think that with each group of people, one of those Whataburger robbers, his brother is in prison right now for robbing Whataburgers 5 years ago. So part of it's just a coming of age of another group of young folks that have to learn sometimes the hard way that crime doesn't pay. Another idea is just the culture that is part of a subculture of today, where violence is celebrated. I mean, if the rougher you are, the meaner you are, the more status you have in certain groups. And so I think that that's a contributing factor as well. And then the accessibility of firearms. All these folks were armed. They all had weapons. I mean, and the Whataburger robbers, the juveniles, they all had guns. And one of the guns we took off one of them was used in a robbery in Dallas where they shot 3 people. We know that because of our NIBIN system. We test fired the gun and matched it to a crime in Dallas, and Dallas is investigating that. Not necessarily that these guys did it, but that gun, how it makes its rounds. That's part of the intelligence. I want to know where those guns are coming from and how they're changing hands, what are the source and all that. So the availability of firearms on the illicit market, illicit firearms, that's another contributing factor as well.
Chief, this summer, obviously a lot of times kids can get a little wilder in the summertime. What are your plans this summer in terms of if we have some available or some extra SROs or other officers in terms of getting a few extra officers on the streets, as well as maybe some neighborhood community policing that we otherwise perhaps couldn't do during the school year?
Well, first of all, in the summer, we're planning to do have 4 sessions of our summer camp again. Kids are identified. This year, we're going to focus on middle school kids because we see that one group of robbers, they were 15 and 16, and they're not too far out of middle school. So we want to connect with kids at that critical age because we see kids that's going to go the other way. Middle school is very critical to that. By 9th grade, they pretty much determined. So we want to try to make a connection there. We are going to use our SROs to deploy. Our deployment is where our real enforcement bread and butter is. When we develop these targeted areas, these hot spots, we pay officers in 4 hours or 6 hour increments to go in and target those areas. So far, we're seeing that's the kind of results we're seeing from that. The SROs will be used as well, but the real important part is the laser focus through the analysis of where the right place, the right time, focusing on the right places and the right people. People, places, and behaviors is what we're going to focus on. So,
I know you'd mentioned the summer camps. Will there be some additional manpower to also work some neighborhoods where there's a lot of kids running around loose and be able to interact with some of those young people as well?
Yes, sir. Each summer camp is going to have 3 police officers there of the SRO unit. And so there's 19 officers there. In between those that aren't in training and that aren't on vacation are going to be deployed in the patrol force. Yes, sir.
I'm grateful for what you and your folks do. And one other question. So I know we talked about it briefly before in our last workshop. On the days we're a little bit thinner staffed or if something's going on, we got somebody sick, do we have some occasional assistant chief? I know that you work some evenings and weekends, and I'm grateful for that. Do we sometimes also have maybe command staff or assistant chiefs fill in to supervise some of the evenings or on the weekends some if we're a little bit thin to provide that extra support?
We haven't had an issue with supervision. Everyone outside of patrol, everyone who's an investigator or an SRO, a sergeant outside of patrol, lieutenants, captains, everybody, we all have to work 20 hours a year in patrol. And so we try to match that up to when there's a need. When other people are on vacation, we try to fill those gaps with that time. We don't want to just throw 20 hours out there for nothing. Many of them work much more than that, especially the investigators, because they'll go out like this and do this targeted surveillance and things like that, depending on what we develop. And sometimes it's a mix. A lot of people want to see a police car on the street. They want to see the presence. There's a research study that was done all the way back in 1972 that just having a police car there is not a deterrent. They have to be engaged. People need to see them stopping folks, see them talking to people, getting them out of the car. So the Kansas City Patrol experience proved that we got to get officers out of the vehicle, out there, and connecting with folks. And that's our goal. That's what we're going to do at every opportunity. And yes, some of that will be commanders, but the real bread and butter is the targeted hours at the high crime areas at the right place at the right time.
Well, thank you, Chief. Thanks for all your work.
Any other? Yes, sir. No, sir.
Chief, I just want to thank you for such a thorough briefing on this quarterly report. It's fantastic. I really appreciate the way you featured some of the specific officers and some of the different things that they've done, the creative things that they've done. I think it speaks mountains to your department that you're encouraging and empowering officers to help with the problem solving. And what I'm more impressed about, though, is the way in which you've delivered on all of the things you told us you were going to do when we were interviewing you. You told us you would innovate. You told us you would bring technology. You told us you would bring data analysis. And you told us that you would be getting more officers on the street. And you've been delivering on all of those. And I appreciate it. And it's making a difference. And your statistics and your numbers and everything has proven that. So I really appreciate your hard work and your diligence and your continued perseverance over what maybe some folks don't see the difference being made, but I see it, and I really appreciate the hard work that you're putting into this and the heart that you're putting into this. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'd like to echo that as well. Appreciate your presentation tonight and what's taking place with our police department in our community. Giving a description of the beats tonight as well and the officers that are taking on these beats. And also what our mayor said as well. Just to be able to get these stories out even more and more. If they commit a crime, they will be caught. And the stories about these criminals being caught, it's great. It's awesome. And I appreciate what y'all are doing. I did want to ask you, along with what Councilman Archer was mentioning about teens this summer, anything proactive you can mention also in regards to teen parties and that type of thing that we know it's been a concern in the city and concern in the community, being proactive in that area and what we're doing in that regard.
Yes, sir. Anytime we become aware of a party that's planned, and oftentimes our SROs will have young folks tell them things because they have relationships that they've built through the school year that carry on in the summer. We're gonna address those things when we know about them coming up. If we get calls about them, when we go out there and see it's a house party, we're definitely gonna make contact with the adults there and try to establish the ground rules before things get out of hand. In each of those parties that they've had that have made the news, that have risen to the top, either an adult, two of them adults were there, had just removed themselves from the scene. One party they went upstairs and just locked themselves in the bedroom and let mayhem go down there. We're going to let them know that they're accountable for what happens on their property, and we're going to make sure that we reinforce that and we follow up on that. But anytime we do that, we'll treat it like any other piece of data or intelligence. We will deploy based on the intelligence that we get, and we will respond accordingly.
Great. Thank you again for your presentation tonight.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.